I'm Sean, this is a McLaren 570S, and it has a bit of a cooling problem. The owner of it tells me that whenever you're driving, it will slowly creep up and eventually get into the yellow over 220 degrees. You can turn the heat on, it does bring it back down. These are all classic symptoms of needing thermostats, and this does happen more on 570s than it does on other models. Particularly the 2016, 2017 models seem to be the most prone. Definitely see it more on 16s and 17s, but in the 570, this is something that I do see periodically. Also, more often in the coupe than the Spider. Now, to do this job, you are going to need to drain the coolant first. I'll give you a little bit of detail on that, not a whole lot. I will get more detail on removing the intake manifold because that's where the thermostats are, directly underneath. So let's jump right in with the beginning of lifting the car, however method you want to use. I'm going to use the jack and jack stands. I realize there's a lift behind me. It's a 4-post. There's a reason. I'm going to do it on jack and jack stands. And then there are 3 points that we want to drain all the coolant from. Now for our drain points, this guy right here, that comes off the water pump. You want to do that one, you're going to get some amount out of there, not too messy. This one, when you take this one off, coolant is going to go that way from the pump and that way from the hose. You want a very wide opening collection type thing for there. You're going to get most of it out of those two. And then the third one being right here. That one, again, it may go this way and this way at the same time. Depends on how much you're actually pulling out. You'll get less out of this, maybe a gallon at most out of that, but usually around a half gallon. So those 3 drain points. And then you get to the fun stuff. For reference, this is the container that I'm using. It's basically like that. Do something like that. Now, I'm sure in the comments we're going to see things like how many miles are on it, and that matters about as much as how ugly your wife is, because this is just a thing that does happen. There's no consistency to any of it. You don't need to see, I put on this video where it had this many miles, so they all fail at that. No, they don't all fail, and it's not all at the same mileage. Now we've got the coolant drained. Time for the fun stuff. So once we get in here, we've got the ISG that is right here. We're actually going to take this opportunity to delete it because we do have to take this loose anyway. Unbolts from right here. There are 8mm bolts. There are 3 of them. We got to take this off first. This 10mm. However you want to choose to get that off. This hose right here just pulls off. And take the 10. That clamp comes off. Then 3 8mm. This whole thing comes off. We're going to get rid of that all together. If you're doing a later 2017, this is an early 17. A later 17 is going to have the ISG underneath the intake manifold. It's a completely different style that's on there. So you won't have this thing on that. From there, we're going to take the throttle bodies off, which means we also take these hoses off. These are going to be a 7mm, I believe, on these 2 clamps there and there. Take those loose. And then we've got a 5mm on the throttle bodies. There is an electrical plug right down here. It's easier to see it with the hose off. So we're going to unplug that, take this whole thing off. Which side you have it on does not matter in the end. They are the same part. So we're going to take all this stuff loose and we'll go to the next part. So we're a bunch of the way through this, but I want to make a note on this plug that is on the throttle body. It goes in like so, but when you go to pull it out, there are actually push clips on both sides. So the top and bottom, push them in like so, pulls right out. Down here on top of the injectors, we've got this padding. And it's just there for noise. And it is on both sides. And it does just pull out. You do need to get to that because we need to get to these bolts that are on top here. There are 2 in every spot that you see it. So there's one there diagonal. Same way all the way down here. One on this end, one on this end. You can't actually get to them. It's a little difficult to get in there. I'll show you the little trick, but also know that up here you do actually have some connections. There's a fuel line that is back there. It's denoted by having a little green spot on it. You just push the green spot in and push it away and it'll separate. That is a hard plastic line. Be careful with that. All of this stuff, you don't actually have to take this bracket off. You can take these lines and push them this way so they just go outside of this clip on both sides. So that's how you can manage those guys. And then down there, you can kind of see it. There is a vacuum line. That vacuum line has a clamp on it. The clamp really sucks to take off, but you do have to take that clamp off, get that vacuum line out, and you do need another small clamp for that. We'll dig deeper into that in a little bit. But I'm gonna get the insulation off the other side, and then we'll point out some other things back here. Now from this side, you've got the fuel pressure sensor that's right here, this yellow tab. You simply pull it up, and then you push, and then it comes up. That's not a big deal. You've got another clamp right here. That one is a constant tension if you have an appropriate tool for that, which I do. You gotta take that guy off right there, and then makes it so this you only have to kind of unclip from where it's mounted. But you do have to take that clamp off. And then you have the injector harnesses themselves. You got one on each side. You'll see the plugs right down there. So you do have to take those loose. Those have a spot where the clip goes on and it slides on. So you can take that loose, and that'll give you a little better access to get down there and pull the plug off. But you've got one on each side. Do not mix those up. It's pretty hard to mix up, like there's only one kind of length there, but don't mix those up because the bank matters. So the tools that are very helpful, for the most part, you've got this 8mm. It is a quarter, but it also has a magnet on the inside. And coming out, that helps because you can just loosen it up, pull it out, and the bolt sticks to it. But going back in is where that really counts, because you can just hold the bolt, drop it right in the hole, get it started. So magnetic 8mm helps a lot. And that one by cylinder number 1 is in a little weird spot. This is a universal that has an 8mm on the end of it. This is also very helpful to get in that weird spot if that in a flex head or wobble socket extension there won't get in there. This definitely will. And then you can always pull it out with a small magnet. You can also put it back in with a magnet to kind of get it in the right spot and then get it started. So this one at the front on the left, you can see how I have got going through. There's the plastic clip that I ran the extension through, and that is actually pertinent to getting this on here. You can get it straight down that way. You don't have to avoid the clip. Use it to your advantage. Go right through it. You see that red clip down there? Right down there? That you have to turn up. So you got to pull that thing up. It helps you do it from the other side if you get something under it. It pulls straight up, and once you get it up far enough, that will slide back. Back here on the harnesses, there are 2 on that side, 1 on this side. And I took off the one with the red clip, and now you see the other one down there with the green, like I mentioned before. You pinch that one, and that second one comes off. There are 2 fuel lines there. That one's just easier to see after you kind of back this whole thing out. Now the thermostats themselves, we've got to replace both of these. And the way that you do this, there is an electrical connector there and there. It's the same part. So we'll just push that clip in and pull that one out. We do want to get these hoses loose before we take the thermostats themselves loose. And that's where these little wires are. Stick them in there and pop it out, and that will loosen up the sides here. And then you should be able to wiggle this out. There is a metal ring right here, and that kind of fits down in there and locks in. So we're going to pull that out. Try not to use anything to pry on it, because this can bend up, and that could affect your seal if you don't have it quite rightly, if you end up knocking it in one way. So just kind of wiggle it around until it pops out, and it shouldn't be too difficult. Now you've got the hoses loose. You notice this one's a little bit crusty. This one took some effort. You can see where I got a little bit of a bend right there. I was pulling and then got something on there and kind of pushed up just a little bit, and that's how we had to get this one off, because of the crust. This did have the wrong coolant in it before. That may be the reason for it. But we're going to try to get that cleaned up if we can before putting that back in. That was holding us up. To get the thermostats out, there are 2 8mm bolts. There's one right there on that one, and then one on the other side over there that we can't quite see unless we go to the other side. There we go, right there. So there's 2 bolts, one right there, one right there. We're going to unbolt those. Those are 8mm. They will pop off. There is a gasket on that. That gasket may hold you up a little bit. See a little tug, should pull the gasket off. You should have a new gasket with your new one, so you shouldn't have to worry about salvaging that gasket. And here's your new thermostat, nice and shiny. There is a Mercedes part number for that. Somebody's going to ask for it, so there it is. No, I don't know what vehicle crosses to that. You can figure that out yourself. I just know the part number that works. So we're going to put these in here. The gasket never wants to lay flat when you take it out of the box. What I do recommend is getting those little, see that little nub there? That goes up inside the hole, and then put the screws through it, and that will kind of hold it in place from going left and right. Set it directly on top there, and then start the screws in by hand. So one thing you may have noticed I did here is I covered up all of the inlet ports, and that's because if you drop something in there, it will be bad. We don't want to do that. Having a magnetic socket over here also helps in you not doing that, but if for some reason any grime or who knows what you end up doing that ends up in there, you don't want that. So make sure you do that ahead of time before taking these guys off. For getting these bolts in. One there, one there. They are 7 foot-pounds or 10 Newton meters of torque. Do not over-torque those. You are going into aluminum, and it is a small bolt. These guys, I got to clean this up before I put it in, but as I did on the other one, you leave this wire in, and you just push it in, and it will lock into place. That's all you have to do. Don't forget to plug in your electrical plug as well. Notable things on getting this intake manifold in and out. It does not come straight up. It doesn't do this. You have to go this way with it. So you may have to kind of move it forward, kind of into all this stuff to make that side clear, but it's easy if you tilt it this way and then slide it out that way. Same thing with going back in as I just did. And now we're gonna leave it pushed back this way so we can fool with these connections, and then we will slide it forward and get the rear cable connections. Something I forgot to mention with putting in the bolts on the thermostats is do not put one bolt in and then tighten it down and then put the other bolt in and tighten it down. Put them both in so they're both just barely snug. And that's gonna make sure that you center it up. I have seen it before where somebody put one in one side and tightened it up and then went to the other. It wasn't all the way flat on one side, it was a little bit crooked, and then it spewed coolant everywhere. So don't do that. Put them both in, so just barely so they make contact, make sure it's flat, then torque those down. Now the reason I thought of that is because of when we go to do the bolts on here, we do have 8 on both sides, and we're going to get them just snugged up like by hand where you start feeling pressure on it. And then we're going to go to the other side and do the same thing, and that's to make sure that the whole thing is perfectly flat and we're not torquing one side down and then pulling the other side, potentially warping this or having a bad seal. So we're just going to get it just where it's snug on all of them, then all of them, then go back and torque them. And these are 7 foot-pounds or 10 Newton meters as well on this. So you've got all this stuff back together, and we can put coolant back in it. And for that, you should follow one of the other videos. You do need a vacuum filler to do that. And you're going to take about 3 gallons of fluid for that. So, for these guys, 7 foot-pounds, if you don't have the ability to tighten those up 7 foot-pounds, which you probably should, but if you don't, these don't have to be absolutely critical to make them kind of snugged up. You should have an idea of what 7 foot-pounds is by now. It's not a lot. For getting these, if you try to put them on backwards, like this end here, you might fight it to try to get in there. It looks like it's very similar, but it's not quite. If it's not going on, spin it around, Bob's your uncle, will go right on. Other than that, you should be good at this point. Make sure you got all the stuff connected up here and your injector harnesses and that other one down there, as well as the other hose that goes right there. I almost forgot that one, so make sure you don't do that. Other things you might screw up and how it will act. If you don't plug in your throttle bodies, as you might forget because they're on the bottom, it's probably not going to start or act right, rough idle, whatever. But the other one is these clamps. Make sure these clamps off the intercooler to the throttle body are tight. And I don't mean strip out the clamp tight, but make sure they're pretty tight, because if you have those loose, what can happen is under boost, it will pop off. You can have a boost leak, which will cause problems, and maybe it doesn't quite pop off, but you'll still get a boost leak fault. You get a check engine light, that kind of stuff. If you just start it normally, it's probably going to start fine. But once you start driving, if it starts acting weird, double check if you have those clamps tight. That could be a problem. Before getting all the final assembly done, I fired it up, made sure that nothing leaked, everything was good, and it was. Finished it, putting it back together. The owner is now putting some miles on it to make sure that everything is good and everything is resolved before I leave town. And that is that. We did have to clear a check engine light. There was one that actually was for a rationality from a temperature sensor, which everything kind of points back to the thermostat, but that is what the fault actually was in this particular case. Sometimes there are actual thermostat faults. It will actually say that thermostat is bad. I've also had where a thermostat operated normally, but it said the thermostat was bad. Go figure. But that's how that job is done. Obviously, if you have any questions, post that below. If you don't want to do this job yourself, you can always hire me to do it. I travel worldwide to do these kind of things, and I'll see you in the next one.